Hello everyone, my name is Dorothea Doomfroom, founder of Law City, and I'd like to welcome you all to our first ever episode of Law City Uncut. For the past few years, I've been building Law City, which is a platform that connects aspiring lawyers from low socioeconomic backgrounds to the legal sector in London. Since 2019, we've built a network of over 3,000 aspiring lawyers globally, had over 20 impactful events, and provided mentorship to several aspiring lawyers. Law City Uncut is simply an extension of this. We aim to bring you the sharpest minds and the most inspiring people of the legal industry and ask them the questions that you'd like to ask them on a day-to-day basis. Today, I'm joined by Rachel Holmes, who is a phenomenal leader and the Chief Executive of Matrix Chambers. She's also part of the committee of the Bar Council of England and Wales, and I'm excited to talk to her today and find out exactly what makes Rachel Holmes.
Well, thank you very much, Dorothy. It's a lovely introduction and thanks for inviting me along today.
You're welcome. I'm so excited to have you with us today, as you know. But I think for us to understand how you got to where you are today, it's important for us to understand your early years. So talk to me about Rachel Holmes at 18 years old. Who was she? Who did she want to become? And what steps was she taking at 18 to get there?
Okay. I mean, I think at 18 I was pretty unformed, and I do look at young people today and see that they are perhaps more channeled than my generation was. So I'm now 56 and I was 18 back in the middle 80s. So that's a long time ago for many of you. I'm looking around me. Oh, bless you. I certainly feel it. It was a different world, and I don't think we had quite the strain and the stress that young people have today to excel at such a young age. So I certainly knew I had to get some good grades to get into the university I wanted to go to, and I think that was actually quite a difficult moment for me in my life because I slightly messed up with my A-levels. So I'm someone who came on the back foot. I was predicted to do extremely well, and for one reason or another, I didn't realise my potential, mostly my own fault. And I was offered very low grades to get into Manchester. So the fact that I'd messed up didn't actually impact on me getting into the university of my choice. So 18, all I wanted to do was go to university. In those days, you had a grant to go there. Again, different world than we have today. And I think I went with very limited expectations. I wanted to study history, which I went to do. I wanted to have a good time, which I had. And beyond that, I didn't really have a goal at that time.
Right. That's very interesting. So how does someone who failed their A-levels, wanted to study history, doesn't have a law degree, or even legal work experience by the sounds of it, how does someone like that end up becoming the chief executive officer of a leading chamber?
Well, it was a long arc to getting there. I think maybe having had that little bit of, I won't say it was failure, but setback, not to get quite the grades that I should have got at that time, made me reflect about how I approach life after that. And it certainly made me knuckle down a little bit more at each step of my way after that. So one thing I'm really clear about is that failure is not a bad thing when it happens, as long as you treat it with respect and you turn it around. So I went into my working world just really keen to make the most of every opportunity that came along and to make sure that from there on in, I always reached my potential. I think I did beat myself up for a long time that I didn't. And one thing I would say to your audience is, I'm pretty certain that a lot of people who will be listening to this today will have had moments of disappointment in their life, challenges they've had to overcome, whether challenges that they've made for themselves in my case, or that challenges that are external to them. But I know everybody who I ever speak to who's reached a certain level in their career, they've had a fair amount of upset along the way to get there. So don't let that deter you. So I began in sales and marketing. That was in the travel industry, and that was great fun, and that was back in the day. And I kept putting my hand up, and I ended up becoming marketing director for my division, my part of the company that I was working in. And here I hit another roadblock because I had a baby when I was in my late 20s. And I did my typical thing of putting my hand up again for the next promotion. And I was told, I don't think you want that promotion because you've got a small baby. And somebody else was making that decision for me, and that didn't feel right. The person who ended up getting the promotion was a man who had a baby, the same age as me, the same age as my baby.
Yeah.
And the injustices of the world really hit me full on then.
How did that make you feel at that moment? Do you think that it made you reevaluate what you wanted to do going forward? And
everything. I mean, I felt totally slapped in the face. I'd been working really hard. I'd been that, as I said, that can-do person. I'd moved my way up the ladder. I think every 18 months in my 20s, I'd had a promotion in this company. And it was great fun and I loved it. So I'm not actually knocking, you know, I don't want anyone who knew me then to think I'm knocking the whole thing. But those days were unfair. And I was at the receiving end of that. So what I ended up doing, in fact, was putting my hands in the air and saying, okay, I've hit the glass ceiling, I'm off. So I left the world of work after my second baby and became a full-time mum, thinking I was going to do that just for a year. And I loved it. And I ended up staying out of work for nearly 10 years.
10 years?
Yeah.
How did you manage to still stay engaged though? Because I can't imagine leaving work for 10 years and still being able to come back and then achieve the level of success that you have achieved. So what did you do during that time to remain engaged, to keep in the loop, to stay on top of the trends and things that were happening?
Yeah, that's really, really good question. I was really ready, as you can imagine, at the end of 10 years to come back into sort of adult life.
Yeah.
And I was very lucky. I got a break from a friend of mine who was a mum at the school gate, who asked me to come and cover some classes in a business school where she was the dean of the business school. And I just went in for 6 weeks just to stand in for somebody else. I absolutely loved it. I was terrified to do it, but quickly overcame that and found that I loved working with young people again, I loved lecturing, and I loved using my brain again. I stayed there for a couple of years lecturing. I then got a promotion, which is my story. I'm very fortunate, but I keep sort of raising my head above the parrot, put my hand up again. And I became I stepped away from being frontline lecturing, and I became the marketing director for the educational group. And part of that group had a law school. So that's my first little in with the law. So this was BPP Law School, which possibly a lot of the people listening to this
are currently attending.
And I became the marketing director for the business school and the law school, and it also had a school of health. I think it still does. And from that, when I was working there, I got to hear about a job as the chief executive of a barristers' chambers.
Wow. What were you thinking at the time?
Yeah,
you saw that job?
Do you know, I mean, I didn't really know what it was, but I happened to know someone who was at the time a QC, now a KC, who was in that barristers' chambers, who had drawn it to my attention. And I just became fascinated. One, at the kind of world of the law, but two, by the scope that you have in the role of chief executive, because you get to touch all the different parts of a business. And I applied, I got it. Fantastic, wonderful barristers' chambers that I worked in there. And then 2 years later, the job at Matrix came up. And again, I put my hand up. And again, I was very lucky and I got it.
So during those interviews, did you feel like you were ready? Did you feel prepared?
No, I didn't. But what I did was I did masses of homework.
Right.
So I did it like I was an Olympic athlete. I spoke to anyone and everyone I could think of who might have something they could help me with. So a friend of a friend was a barrister, so I phoned my friend up and said, could I talk to your friend? And somebody else was a something else, and I knew somebody who was a chief executive of something, and I just called on these tenuous links that I had in my life. And one thing I learnt then, and I say now to everybody, is people are really happy if you ask them for help. Ask for help, people give. Most of us who've got something to give back are happy to do so. So I asked for help, and I did a lot of homework, and I did a lot of Googling, and I do remember being away on a family holiday 2 weeks before my interview to become a chief executive, and I can remember sitting at the kitchen table early in the morning and late at night and literally doing homework for this interview. So you don't get anywhere unless you really put the graft in. And even if you do put the graft in, sometimes it doesn't pay off, but you have to put the graft in. Yeah, you have to try.
Yeah, I can relate so much to that. I remember my interview for my firm, and I literally treated it like it was an exam.
Yeah.
Wrote down any potential question that I could think about and find possible answers. And I think that's a great point that people can take away from this, is you actually need to put the work in. You're not going to walk into the room and blag it.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can still put up your hand up, but make sure that you're as prepared as you can be.
The other thing I know I did was that I had an image in my head of what I wanted to project in that meeting. And I had a picture in my mind, a bit like manifesting, of a successful woman, chief executive, and I just held that picture and I walked in with that person in my head.
I love that. So Rachel, we actually met a few years ago. Do you remember when we met? I think it was at a Generation Success event.
It was wonderful. Yeah, I mean, Generation Success is a marvellous organisation, and I was really, really happy to be talking there.
Yeah, and at the time I was an aspiring lawyer. I was extremely nervous, but I decided to put up my hand anyway and ask you a question.
Yeah.
Do you remember what question I asked you?
No, remind me, go on.
Don't worry, I've got you. I think I asked you something along the lines of, how have you dealt with fear, but particularly the fear of failure? And you said two things that stuck to me till this day. The first thing was, if you're not making any mistakes, then you're doing nothing at all. And the second one is something that a lot of people would hear me say all the time, which is jump off the cliff and learn how to fly on your way. So I guess my question to you is, you spoke a bit about the moments where you felt scared and you still put up your hand up and went for opportunities. But are there any phases within your career recently where you felt like you had to jump off the cliff or overcome the fear of failure in order to progress?
I think in micro ways, almost every day, there's something unexpected that happens, or where in my world I deal with very difficult situations sometimes, and extremely wonderfully bright people are around me who often have very difficult situations, complex situations themselves that they need my support with. And I think whether I feel fear now, I don't think I feel fear now. But that may simply be because I've dealt with so much fear further back in my life that I've learnt to just, process it. I think the unexpected is what happens in life. I think change is something that can be fearful, and that I've learnt not to be fearful of, because it's just part of the world. I do think there's something that happens as you get a bit older, and you have a bit more gravitas, and perhaps you have a bit more weight to pull around. But yes, I mean, I look ahead. I'm sure I'm going to have some challenges thrown at me in the future that's going to make me have to stand up and be counted again.
Okay, Rachel, I think now we're going to unpack a quote, if that's okay.
Okay.
And it's a quote by Ketanji Brown Jackson, who is the first Black female justice of the Supreme Court, and also the 6th female justice of the Supreme Court in its 223-year history, which is a bit insane. But she said something which I think I would like to talk to you a bit about. She said, "It was my father who started me on this path when I was a child. My father made the fateful decision to transition from his job as a public high school history teacher and go to law school. Some of my earliest memories are of him sitting at the kitchen table, reading his law books. I watched him study, and he became my first professional role model." My question to you is, how vital are role models in each journey to leadership or success?
Yeah, I think they're key. And I think the sadness is that some people don't have them. I I had role models in my parents. They were both head teachers of big comprehensive schools, and I remember them doing exactly that, sitting at the kitchen table on a Sunday morning, really working to get themselves ready for the week ahead. I was fortunate to see what hard work looked like and how it paid off, but I'm really conscious that lots of people don't have that. So that's where you need to reach out to things like Law City, or to be bold and link in with people like me. Look around you. Sometimes you can find your role model on the television, if not in real life. You can find it in newspapers, you can find it through reading. It's out there, and you have to be creative about it. But I do think all of us need role models. I still need role models today, and I look about me for the inspiring people, not just women, people who will take me to the next level. I'd also say it's tough if you're not used to having people around that you can call on. So that's where you need to look out for each other.
Yeah, I think we spoke previously about the importance of that kitchen table conversation and how people from low socioeconomic backgrounds don't have access to it. And I guess when I was thinking of creating Law City Uncut, that is what I wanted to do, is to almost package those conversations and bring it to the kitchen tables of those who don't have access to it. So yes, we realize that there is a problem, but I think, as you said, through speaking to other people, joining networks, bold and putting up your hand up and asking for help, you can create those kitchen conversations and find those inspiring role models. So
we try and do that at Matrix very much. We've got a work placement scheme, and we try and get young people who are still in school, who maybe don't have somebody ahead of them in their family who's been to university already, or maybe don't have somebody who's anywhere near the law in their family, to get them in at 16, 17, so really quite fresh, to give them a week experience in Matrix so they can have a little look at it. If they're keen, they can then apply to do something called our Future Lawyers scheme, which is particularly targeted at people from underrepresented groups who maybe don't have access to the profession, so that they can come and get some experience in exactly what you're talking about, where they can be mentored by a barrister, have some of those conversations that maybe they're not getting at home. And then beyond that, we are part of the wonderful scheme called Bridging the Bar, which is
heard about that.
It's absolutely amazing. Particularly looking for talented young black people who want to join the bar, who can come and do a mini pupillage. And so we go on. We try and open the doors to people who wouldn't necessarily get
And how do people apply for these positions? Do they go on your website?
So on our website, it's got information about our work placement scheme, and that's simply open to people who are still at school today. From that, if they're lucky enough to get onto that, they can apply for the Future Lawyers scheme. Bridging the Bar is out there for anybody who wants to have a look at that. And there's another wonderful organisation called 10,000 Black Interns, and I urge anyone who's interested in coming into this sector who doesn't maybe have an in, to look at that, because that gives you an internship, but the key about it is it's a paid internship. So we know that there's lots of people who simply couldn't possibly do an internship for free, which is what's expected of young people today, and it's a living wage paid to you to come and do the internship. So have a look at 10,000 Black Interns.
That's amazing, and I'm sure a lot of our audience will find that information super useful. So you do a lot outside of work in terms of improving diversity inclusion and improving social mobility, but I guess what I want to know is, why is diversity inclusion so important to you?
Primarily, I guess, because there's so many really talented people that I've learnt along my pathway have not had the opportunities that I've had, and I see that they've had barriers that really just shouldn't be there. I think it's deeply unjust and unfair. I probably started off from a gender perspective, where my own personal experience, and I've learnt along the way at all sorts of other discriminations, which perhaps I didn't spend enough time thinking about in my early career. But I'm privileged to be in a position now that we can, alongside the wonderful team that I work with and the really inspirational barristers who I work with, make a difference. And I'm determined that as an organisation we do that.
What do you say to the older generation who are not aware of the struggles that people face and they are reluctant to educate themselves. Do you think it's the job of people from diverse backgrounds to educate them, or do you think that's the responsibility?
I don't think it's the job of people from diverse backgrounds to do that. I think it's the job of all of us collectively to do that, and particularly those of us in positions of authority or power or influence to be doing this, and for us to take each other by the hand and show us the right way forward. It is difficult when people are from a different generation and they don't get it, but I do now feel it's their responsibility to get with this. It's no longer acceptable to say things were different in their day.
Yeah. And I think we spoke about the fact that so much has happened, such as the Me Too movement, George Floyd, things that have been shown so publicly that there's no longer an excuse for people to say, I don't understand, or I'm not aware of certain struggles. So
absolutely right. I mean, Me Too was horrifying for so many of us, except for those of us who'd had lived experience of, you know, I'm a woman from the 80s and 90s, and, you know, it's pretty commonplace, some of the experiences that were being raised in the hashtag Me Too movement. George Floyd, we had a lot of anger right across the professional service sector and everywhere else after that, and far too many of us have been too slow to make change happen for our talented colleagues who are from minority ethnic backgrounds. And now I'm really pleased to say there's big changes happening. So I hope that everyone's going to feel the impact of that, and it's just awful that it had to come about like that.
I spent some time with Rachel earlier as we took a walk across the pier. I just had a few more questions for her. So take a look at this. You wear a lot of hats. You are a mother, you're the chief executive officer of a leading chamber, and you also do a lot of volunteering outside of work. So how do you unwind? What do you do for fun?
Yeah, that's very important, and it's absolutely key that you have two parts to life, professional and the personal element. I do a lot of yoga, I do a lot of cycling, I cook, do watch some television.
What's your favourite show?
Oh my gosh, at the moment it's Succession.
Wow.
That. Yeah, and I've got a family, so I'm blessed that my parents are still alive, so I spend some time with them, and I've got my kids, and good friends.
Thank you, Rachel. This has been an absolutely inspiring conversation, and I think we've covered a lot of ground. We spoke about Gen Z, we spoke about your career so far, we spoke about the importance of diversity inclusion, and I think these are all topics that are extremely important, and I think that our audience is going to find extreme value from it. But what's next for Rachel Holmes?
I hope more of the same, to be honest. I have a really fabulous job working at Matrix Chambers. I work with some of the best brains in the world. I work with some of the most wonderful staff and barristers, and right across the legal sector, I work with great people. So I'm happy where I am there. What I want to do is perhaps spread out a little wider. I'm looking at how I perhaps might join a couple more boards. I have been on the board of a charity before. I'm not currently. I'm looking to do that in the future. Looking perhaps at a non-executive directorship in the future. So just to spread the kind of expertise and experience that I have, so that it has different touch points. But yeah, I very much hope more of the same.
Thank you all for tuning in. I think you would agree that it has been an extremely insightful conversation. But of course, this is only our first episode, and we have loads more inspiring stories in store. To stay connected with us, just follow our social media handles down below.